Hello and welcome to episode 226 of the Chills at Will podcast. Pleasure today to be speaking to Andrés N. Ordorica is a Andres is a queer Latinx writer based in Edinburgh, that is Edinburgh, Scotland. Drawing on his family's immigrant history and third culture upbringing, his writing maps the journey of diaspora and unpacks what it means to be from ni de aquí ni de allá, which is neither here nor there. He's the author of the poetry collection At Least This I Know and the novel How We Name the Stars. He's been shortlisted for the Morley Lit Prize, the Mo Siewcharran Prize, and the Saltire Society's Poetry Book of the Year. In 2024, he was selected as one of the Observer's 10 best debut novelists. Good morning slash evening. How are you today?
I'm all right. Yeah, yes, it is evening here in Edinburgh, and I'm looking outside my big window of my living room, and the sun is setting quickly.
Okay, and I definitely mispronounced the Scottish city. Gosh darn it! I should know. I should know better. It wasn't one that I asked about. I thought I had it. I was too confident. This overconfidence thing. Well, congratulations on the book, The Observer's 10 Best Debut Novelists. It's kind of crazy to think that this is your debut novel. I was telling you before we started recording. It's an incredible read. It's incredibly profound, and definitely I've not stopped thinking about it since the book closed, and I won't for a long, long time. How's it feel? Kind of in the I want to say it's been maybe 2, 3 weeks since it came out.
I think it will be 3 weeks tomorrow that it's since it's come out in the US. It's been so surreal and strange. I was very fortunate that I was able to go over to the US on the East Coast for
Mm-hmm.
a small book tour around the pub date, and it was just, yeah, a bit of a whirlwind. And the reception has just been, so lovely. Um, and then yeah, I've returned to Edinburgh, and I'm kind of like yeah, seeing things sort of here and there, and then preparing the US edition or the UK edition
Mm-hmm.
comes out in July. And then I've been working. I'm in the middle of like the final edits of novel two,
Oh my
and so my
gosh.
brain is in like a very strange space.
Oh, I bet is how we name the stars, is that almost like in the rearview mirror in some ways, where you almost where feel like you have to put it there in order to work on the second novel and finish it?
Um, yes and no. I was very fortunate that I had like the insane idea of wanting to get through novel number two before novel one came out. And I won't say it's advice because that would be sort of unfair to him to say it was advice, but I kind of was inspired. I was lucky enough to interview Douglas Stewart when
Okay.
his sophomore novel came out, and it was sort of ahead of what was going to be a very big tour throughout the UK and particularly in Scotland because he had never been able to come for Shuggy Bain because of the pandemic. So anyway, I was really like just my mind was blown when Douglas Stewart told me that he had finished writing Young Mungo before Shuggy Bain came out, and it
Whoa.
just like I did not understand how that was possible, especially sort of like the trajectory that he had and
Mhm.
continues to have. And it just was like this eye-opening sort of moment of realizing, like, as a writer, to try and get through at least the majority of a draft or two drafts of a sophomore novel before readers have too many eyes on your debut can be
Ah.
very helpful. And for me, at least, like I didn't want to get caught up in what people thought I should write next. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
it's funny, but like I feel so deeply invested in Daniel and Sam as characters. And so, yes, but it is that funny thing of like, sort of as readers, a reader's sort of perception of my writing will, of course, be coming through this debut novel. But yeah, to hold space for those two characters while trying to sort of make space for other characters that I am falling in love with and deeply invested in is like a very funny sort of um, liminal state, I guess.
Yes. Oh, that is so interesting. That is so interesting. Well, yeah, I know that you have a poetry background. And I think only poets say liminal, right? So there it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, what does it even mean? I don't know.
It was mentioned. It was featured at least once in the how we name the stars, right? I believe. I want to say. Um, that's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I wanted to ask about you talking about like you think that readers might have some expectations. It's human nature. Do you? I mean, is this a totally different novel, the second one, or do you feel like there's a lot of similarities?
I think it feels a part of a similar world. I would say, though, it's funny. The character, or the main character of what I hope will be my sophomore effort, is a few years older than Daniel, and I think by virtue maybe slightly more jaded. Whereas I think what has
Mm,
been really lovely about sort of the reception I've been getting with this debut is that I think there's just a very beautiful earnestness in Daniel and like a true desire of figuring out who he is. And I think what I'm trying to do with this second novel is really explore through particularly a queer lens, like, okay, you've made it through the proverbial closet, you've come out, and like, what if life actually isn't like this grand, there's not this grand change, and
mm,
like, how does one move forward in their life? And so it's sort of set at the end of, or in the final years of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and but written from like the perspective of a young man growing up as a military brat, and kind of all of that, and sort of what religious dogma, like this influence of that version of machismo. So yeah, I would
mm.
say, but it's still, I want to say, very joyous, and it has a love story, and there's no death, which is nice, which is not a sort of, it's so funny. I think like I don't ever really get worried about spoilers, but I have to
Yes,
remember like
please.
during like this the publicity for the
Right, right,
debut,
right.
that telling people that is not a spoiler when I say like Sam is dead, like that
Yes,
happens on page 3. It's literally
yes.
what the first things that Daniel the narrator says to the reader.
Right.
But yeah, I wanted to kind of sort of like live in that sort of same world view of like what is it to grow up. But I wanted to just sort of kind of come. So whereas Daniel's starting university life, this next book is kind of at the close of it, and like what then happens next.
Right. Well, just in the little time talking to you, I would not call you a brat. So, but it sounds like possibly you have a military background as well. I'd just love to know about growing up and particularly your relationship with the written word. Were you the kid that's always at the library? How did that work?
Yeah, I was like, yeah, exactly that. I loved the library. I loved library at school, like especially in elementary school. That was some of my favorite memories. Like during the week would be when we could go to the library, and like I remember, and it's funny now that like it's just like jogged my memory, and I've not thought
Mm,
about it forever. But I remember when, so yeah, I grew up as a military brat, and I spent most of my life overseas, and so I remember when we were living in Turkey. So these are my final years of elementary school. My mom volunteered at my school at the library. I wonder if she even remembers this. And I remember,
mm,
yeah, like I'd go to the school library and I'd get to see my mom. I think my love for the written word came from my love of storytelling. And I always say my mom was the first person to introduce me to the art of storytelling. She is a prolific storyteller. I always think like if only my mom kind of sort of felt this urge to write, I think my mom could be a brilliant writer because she's an amazing storyteller. And
mm,
I just grew up sort of so hungry for my mom's stories of growing up in Northern California as the daughter of immigrants from Mexico, and just sort of all of the kind of cinematic beauty that brought, and sort of the strangeness of having to grow up very fast, and having to translate on behalf of my grandparents and kind of do a lot of like the life admin in their house, and then she would tell me like what it was like when they would go back to Mexico, because on my mom's side, all of my family in Mexico comes from the north. So it's similarly to Daniel's family in the novel, so Chihuahua in the north of Mexico. And it was just, yeah, my mom and my mom's encouragement, and my dad as well, of my love of reading. My dad is such an athlete, and I on his side of the family, I come from like a family, a group of people that just love sport. And being Northern California, they love the 49ers and they love the Giants. I am not an athletic person in the slightest. And I think, though, I really appreciate, especially my father, kind of fighting against all these stereotypes that Mexican men kind of have to face of machismo. My dad was just so encouraging of my love of books, and so whereas my older brother would like ask for like new Jordans or things like that around his birthday. I, like, this is aging me, I would ask for gift cards to Borders bookstore, and
What
like
is
there's like
that?
I know there's like, oh, Gen Z, they're like I don't know what that is. That, oh, Borders bookstore at the Galleria Mall in Roseville,
Oh my
California,
gosh. Oh
was
yeah. Oh yeah.
that is just where I really fell in love. I think like when I was at the age of 10 or 12, and we would go back to Northern California for the summer, and my parents would drive us to Roseville, and like I could walk the aisles of the Borders bookstore there, I think, and like spend my own money, or like the money that people gave me for my birthday. Like that, I think, is when I really, really, really fell in love with the idea of books, and
Mm,
like just scanning the shelves of, at that age, it would have been like middle grade and YA,
mm-hmm.
and just like hungering for like more, which is so funny because I grew up in such a beautiful way where I got to see so much of the world, but like
Sure.
books sort of presented an even more infinite possibility of
Mm,
where life could take you. So I think that's where sort of the seeds began to be sown of this desire to attempt a writing career.
oh wow. Yeah, my 7-year-old and my 5-year-old just received some Barnes and Noble gift cards, and they'll probably be going to the Galleria. They're right around the
Yes.
Galleria there, and it's tough now because everything, so much of it is toys and other stuff, and it's like, no, let's just go
Yeah.
to the books only, right? But hey, and I love the little. I'm actually a Northern California Dodger fan, but like the little Brandon Belt reference and all that, like for
Yeah.
the real fans, man. Early in the book, I think it was.
Yes, yes.
19-year-old Daniel, who we'll talk about, of course, in the book, the narrator, he talks about reading like looking for Marquez, one of my probably top two, three of all time, and then seeing Sandra Cisneros' House on Mango Street, and saying I'm 19, I'm finally like seeing myself in a book.
Mm.
Any parallels there? I wonder just about who were some of the writers and writing that really got you pumped up.
Yeah, when it's so funny because what sort of drove me to want to study English in my undergrad, I did an English and drama double major, were sort of like the canonical writers. I think that we're in a great age of decolonizing curriculum, and kind of really expanding like what it means to read the canon, and who has often been sort of missed out on being included. But like writers who made me want to write, like I say in my note to the reader that this is not a memoir and I am not Daniel, but he contains so many elements of me. The writer that really made me want to go on and study English literature was like Nathaniel Hawthorne. Like reading The Scarlet Letter was just such
Mm,
a formative experience for me as a literary scholar, if
sure.
you will. But yeah, around that time, like Zora Neale Hurston's "Their Eyes Were Watching God" was like a revelatory experience. And then in my undergrad, Christina Garcia's Dreaming in Cuban. Um, because I studied drama, like a lot of play texts were really influential too, like Tony Kushner's Angels in America, Susan Laurie Park's Top Dog, Underdog. But like to the reference that you speak of about Sandra Cisneros,
Hmm.
funnily enough, I didn't read Cisneros until I was 23. I
Mm.
had just moved to San Antonio, where my parents
Ah,
now live. And I was working for the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center, and I used to run their museum store. And so I was doing like a stock take, and they have like an amazing. They now have a bookstore. Like they revived the bookstore because I think the bookstore they had was like something that was really sort of prominent in the '90s, and then it kind of went away. But they held on to like this stock of books, and now new staff have come over and revived it, and I've been back, and it's amazing. But anyway,
Hmm.
I remember like they gifted me a copy of House on Mango Street, and it was just this like brilliant experience of like realizing, oh my God, I'm 23. I've just gone through an English undergrad. I've just did a master's in writing for the stage in London. You know, I like have this deep love of reading and writing, and at 23, I felt like it was like the first time I actually read a character that felt
Mm.
like as close to me as possible. And even saying that, it is a very different experience. You know, I didn't grow up in a big city, like it's set in Chicago.
Mm.
But like to have someone who is Mexican American and writing in a way that sort of felt so in symbiosis with my understanding of my cultural background. It was just this brilliant, brilliant experience. But yeah, I think that kind of introduction into sort of the Latinx Hispanic American canon happened actually after my undergrad.
Oh man, I'm trying to think. You have sometimes you have these, well, rarely, but you have these incredible reading experiences where it's almost like you remember where you were when you read the piece.
Yeah.
And I wish I remember. I was trying to look up the name, but maybe the opening story of Woman Hauling Creek. Did
Mm.
you get? And it's the one where it's like the name is like an indigenous name. This guy just like a total like trickster. He tricks the girl and he gives himself like this like mythical name. But it's just one of
Mm.
those. I can tell you exactly where I was when I read it. And it was just like, dang, wow, right? Does Saunders Cisneros know that you're a fan?
No, and you know what? I've never like had the chance to meet her. I follow her on social media, and like I'm deeply in love with her poetry as well.
Ah, okay.
I've had my go at trying to get into Macondo,
Oh yeah.
the writers fellowship that she founded and runs. I haven't landed it yet, but you know, maybe I'm holding out one day. Like I don't want to think I want it to be like this magical kind of, and I'm
Mm.
sure it will feel like that when the opportunity comes. But you know, until then, I'm just so grateful to have her words.
The key word is yet, right? Yet. Oh my gosh. Macondo's is from Marquez, right? His
Yes,
like his
yes.
fictional city and everything. Are
Hmm.
you? I'm ashamed to admit I've never read 100 Years of Solitude, which I was reminded of when well we'll get to it, but when Daniel talks about writing, this book in such like a fevered pitch, like 7 days, eight
Mm.
days. Marquez supposedly wrote 100 Years of Solitude in like 48 hours.
Oh
Uh, I
wow.
think the story's been debunked, but he was supposedly like he was in Mexico City or going to Mexico City on a vacation, and all of a sudden he had this idea and he had to write it down. It's great for like the fevered writing. I think it's kind of been debunked, but I wonder, are you more into short stories, his novels, all the above?
Do you know what? I've never read his novels. I've
Ah,
only read his novellas. Yeah,
okay. Oh,
and that's
really? Oh,
why. Yeah,
same,
yeah.
same.
And like I feel, do I have a copy of uh I definitely at my parents have a copy of Love in the Time of Cholera, but in
Mm.
the original Spanish. And my Spanish,
Ah,
I don't think is good enough to take on that
oh,
whole thing. But no, but it was his novellas are what I fell in love with. I think
yeah.
Leaf Storm, which I reference in the book, I just
Mm-hmm.
found it like so
Mm.
just moving and just so well crafted.
Right. Oh man. As we get into 2024, I wonder who you're reading more recently, more contemporary, whether they directly influence you or not.
Yeah, who am I reading? I have been the great Scottish poet Jackie Kay. I am chairing her in April, and she was our previous Macker, which is a Scots word for a poet laureate. So
Okay.
she was the national poet laureate before Kathleen Jamie took it over, and so I have been. like Jackie Kay has written prolifically, and like so I've been reading many of her older poetry collections.
Okay.
Um, and then yeah, the book that I can't stop talking about that comes out in April, both in the U.S. and the U.K., is Griffin Hansberry's "Some Strange Music Draws Me In," which is like one of the most beautiful books that I have ever read. I keep telling people like it's going to be like my 2024 read. Like I don't think anything else is going to top it. It is just this masterful. Um, uh, Whereas like I think my novel is about like I mean it is his is about a coming of age, but it's written in like a dual perspective in such a profound way. So it's about a trans man who is nearing 40, who has returned to like his small hometown after his mother passes away, and he's like dealing with her affairs, and like him and his sister are deciding if they're going to sell the house or not, and like going through all of like this childhood memorabilia. um and like Hansberry is just so brilliant in his decision, because he decides to write half of the story from the perspective of the narrator's pre-transition self. So,
Mm.
you know, being assigned female at birth and growing up as a young girl in this small town. And it's just very interesting from like this perspective of like a millennial and like dealing with like Gen Z and like their relationship to queerness versus like you know someone older or slightly older, and how we talk about gender and sexuality. And it's just so, but at the core of it, it's just like this really beautiful ode to like survival and kind of finding oneself. It is just stunning. I honestly was on my couch in the final like 10 pages just crying, like
Yeah.
just dark, terribly. I mean, not dark, like just
Sure.
ugly, ugly, convulsive
Mm.
tears. And but the ending is just so joyous and happy, and it's one of those endings that like I just don't think anyone could see coming. And I just think when a writer is able to do that, it's just so profound and so brilliant. So that has been really yeah, one that I think I'm going to continue to sustain for however many 10 months we have
Right.
left of this year.
Oh my gosh! Wow, what a ringing endorsement, huh?
I know.
Man, you should do the trailer or something like that. Some of these book releases have trailers. You should do the trailer. And you were talking about the poet laureate. So it wasn't. It was a peaceful takeover, right? You said took over. I'm like, it wasn't like a wasn't
Yeah,
like
yeah. In the same way,
okay,
you know, and
okay.
no, yes. I mean, I was very sad because Jackie Kay was my first poet laureate
Uh-huh.
moving here to Scotland, and she was the first black poet laureate in Scotland, first like
Mm.
uh, non-white Scottish,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's just but like brilliant, and like has grown up, and like her influence, especially for Black and POC writers living in Scotland, is just so immense. But like it just she's just such a stunning, brilliant mind. Like the way she sees the world, and I've been fortunate enough to be in her presence numerous times. And it's just one of those writers that you feel like anytime you're around, when you walk away, you just feel like life makes that much more sense. Like you've been given this gift of just an expanded worldview, or an expanded understanding of like what does it mean to be human and just move through the world.
Mm. Would that be spelled Kaye, her last name?
Kay.
Kay. Okay. I bet you actually leave positive endorsements on Goodreads as opposed to like just man, the way that you're
Do you know
describing
what?
it.
I don't actually like deal with Goodreads at all. Like it just is like the Wild West to me. It was actually funny. Saying that, I did update my profile today, but like I've yet to do the successful thing. Like I don't know if you write, but like being like trying to get your author's profile set up on Goodreads is like harder, I think, than like opening up a bank account or like trying to get like your original birth certificate. And like so I've given up. But like no, I think it's great that like there exists like this huge community, and you know I'm grateful that right now I have a pretty good Goodreads score for both my collection and my novel. But like it also is just unwieldy to me, and like I think like I'm one of those people, like, if you pay me, I will write a book review, or like I share with friends, or, especially things that I really find like I want to sort of shout about.
Mm.
But like, yeah, I don't know. I'm overly cautious about what I put out there in terms of like saying things about other people's work. And so I just think that is sort of antithetical to the purpose of Goodreads. So it's better that I'm just not there.
That is hilarious. Oh my gosh. The book, of course, is, as we talked about, has been out for, I think, January 30th in the United States, and we're talking on February 19th. It's called How We Name the Stars. And I'd love to know about maybe some seeds, which I think maybe you talked about a little bit, and also that incredible epigraph, which maybe the epigraph and the seeds are related, but from Waiting for Godot, excuse me.
Mm.
Yeah, just some ideas about kind of what led you to write the book. Was it, is this something that's been germinating for 40 years? I don't think you're even 40 years old. For a while. I know you're not. Or is it something, a lot of people COVID books? I don't know. Some seeds for the book.
Um, it was yeah. So all in, it took me about 6 years to write. The sort of germination of it happened in my sort of the latter bit of my 20s. So I'm turning 35 this summer.
All right.
I think, yeah, I was sort of in this very nostalgic kind of positionality as I was facing like my 30s and kind of reflecting on my undergraduate life, and sort of also, I think, yeah, as I was nearing my 30s, like reflecting on a particular loss that shaped the novel and thinking about this person who I'd known since, my high school days and was a really dear friend, and how that person, you know, um, had not seen their 20s at all. Like Daniel, I lost this friend at 19. And so I think, yeah, all of that was kind of sort of bubbling away. And I wanted to like I had tried my hand at actually a novel, so this was not my first attempt at a novel, but I think I had struggled to kind of land what to do with the story. And my first attempt at writing a novel, I think it was just the exercise of writing for that long, whereas this was actually, I felt like I had something to say of the
Mm.
world, and what I wanted to say was like a reflection on loss. But I didn't want it to be memoir, and I didn't want it to be too close to the bone. So I made the decision that I wanted it to be a love story, but not in the traditional sense. I wanted to see a relationship blossom, but also I wanted to explore what would it look like for a character if both their first love and first real loss came from the same root. And yeah, that was sort of like the genesis, and yeah, I say that like the characters of Daniel and Sam were pretty much have maintained like a continuity from
Mm.
like the first sort of few chapters written 6 years ago to the final version my editor at Ten House and I sort of sent off
Mm.
to the printers, but that what yeah, so like the bones have stayed the same, and it was sort of the muscle behind it that has or around it even has kind of shifted and reshaped itself. And so it took many versions before landing on the narrative style of speaking to Sam and writing in that second person style. But yeah, I think to answer your question, I waffle,
No,
but like to try to be succinct is, yeah, the genesis was wanting to explore love and loss, because to me that is just, those are two themes that continue to maintain themselves as part of my thematic sort of au revoir, like especially even with my poetry collection. And yeah, I think for me, there's just something really fascinating about how across different cultures and societies we deal with how we talk about love and loss, and for me, having that kind of also bleed into a coming of age story just presented really interesting possibilities from a writing perspective.
Well, just to make it clear too, I mean, just such a good read, and sorry for the little pause here, but remind us, so Tin House. What are some good places to buy the book? I mean, we can buy it anywhere, but do you have any particular recommendations?
It is a Barnes and Noble Discovery Pick of the Month, so they've been
Hey,
great to me.
yes,
But I always say, like, please, if you can, and you have access to it, a local independent bookstore, like, that is always like a great shout. But even if if you're not in a position to buy, like, I think sometimes people feel like or are ashamed of using like their libraries versus buying a book, especially like a book that has recently come out. But like, I will always advocate for libraries, and I think to sort of demystify it for people, like,
right.
writers earn money from the libraries, like a library, like there are many great, especially in the UK, there's the Author Licensing and Copyright Society. Like, I earn royalties through libraries, and like libraries are so fundamentally important to any functioning society. So
Yes.
yes, please support and buy it if you can, but if not, go to your local library and ask them to buy it, and that's what libraries have budgets for.
Heck
But
yeah.
however you choose to consume it,
Right.
I'm just grateful for readers. There's a wealth of books that anyone could choose from. So to sort of choose to spend time with my writing is just such a blessing for me.
Mm. Tin House, of course, they have it very reasonably priced, and for such a great book. And I would assume bookshop.org would be a good place
Yes,
to get
yep.
something online, right? Helping with independent. Um, this is way, 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 way oversimplifying and not doing full justice. But in some ways, this idea of talking about kind of themes of the book or like a through line, but just like, is it better to have loved than lost, right? And again,
Mm,
that's very simplistic for a book that's so complex and detailed and so interesting and so reflection inducing for
mm.
sure. It's a book that, like you talked about, sitting there on the couch, crying your eyes out. It's like it's gonna make you feel for sure, and there's definitely tears to come and happiness and all that. I'm thinking of like Romeo and Juliet, which like line 6 or something like that. We know what's gonna happen with the star-crossed lovers, right?
Mm.
I wonder about your decision to say Sam is dead within, like you talked about, very very early in the book.
Yeah, that sort of decision was both pragmatic and kind of a slightly poetic, if you will. Pragmatic
Mm.
in the sense that because landing on the second person narrative device, I thought it was important to contextualize for the reader that Sam was who Daniel was speaking to or writing to,
Uh-huh.
even. Um, but that I didn't want to try to I didn't want any trickery. I didn't want it to be like, oh, he's speaking to Sam, and then in the final pages we learn that Sam is
Right.
dead. Like, I just thought
Okay.
like that would distract from what Daniel, the decision making that Daniel that has brought Daniel to in very sort of erratically write this story, this letter,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, within sort of 8 days or so. And so for me, yeah, it's sort of saying that from the get go, I think just it meant that I didn't feel like I was tricking the reader, because that was not the kind of point of this novel. Um, but then also, I think, yeah, like, there is just something really profound and jarring, like that. After uh, every chapter opens with a diary entry from another character that you sort of figure out who it is later on, but that Daniel's first narrative moment are the words "Sam's dead," and kind of like what that sort of unveils very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think within it, kind of in those three words, holds so much like weight that you kind
Yes.
of begin to understand why this character has felt compelled to very manically write the story.
Mm.